Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and the Alfarrari is back in the garage after its big reveal at World Time Attack, and my main focus now is to get it running. Alright guys, welcome back. It's only been a couple of days since World Time Attack, and I am still trying to calm down from that. It was so crazy. Thank you again for everyone who came out, and thanks for everybody I talked to, and again, I'm sorry to those I missed. It was just so crazy busy. I just unfortunately couldn't get to everyone, but it was much appreciated. There seemed to be a lot of love for the Alfarrari, which is fantastic. I am so happy about that. My main focus now that I got it sort of cosmetically done enough, there's still lots of things to do on the inside and stuff like that, but that can wait because we want to get the Alfarrari running, and that is my focus moving forward. Now, just a quick couple of things from the show. I still haven't fixed the dent. It's actually it's not very noticeable. A lot of people, until it was actually pointed out, the show didn't even notice it. Those who knew could see it, but it's a very subtle dent. I haven't fixed it yet. That is not a high priority. All right, so one of the last things I need to make sure of before I try and start the car is that it has enough oil. And I don't know how much oil it needs to take because I've never filled it with oil before, because this is not the factory system anymore. Because the Ferrari system was a little bit unique in the fact that it's a factory dry sump, and the dry sump tank sat on top of the factory gearbox and traveled through a gallery internally in the gearbox and then back into the engine through an O-ring fitting just on the bell housing back into the engine. So I don't have any of that gearbox side. I don't know how much oil was held in that side. It doesn't look like a great deal. I think I've actually got more, or at least it's equivalent, in my custom dry sump tank I made to fit inside the guard. Now, I did put a fuel level / oil level sender into it, and that is going to give me the reading to let me know how much oil is in the tank. Similar to what I have on my old air-cooled 911. I like having the reassurance of knowing that there is some oil in there. It's maybe a little bit redundant once the thing's going, but it's just that little bit of extra reassurance to know that it's going to work. So what I've got is a Raceworks fuel level gauge here. I'm going to remake the faces of most of the gauges in the car because nothing is going to match. So we need to work out the settings on this and work out what we need to do to actually get it to work in the car, and what sort of reading I need to have on the oil level gauge to be happy and comfortable.
So here I'm using the original wooden panel that's a bit old and tatty as my template for the new panel to hold the new gauges. So here I'm using the same 1mm aluminium piece to mark out and make my new panel. Just drill a hole and then punch it out, which is pretty close to the size, and then I finish off getting it just the right size with the die grinder.
All right, so like I mentioned, this is not going to be staying raw aluminium. I have a plan for that, which will come later, but that's fitting in there quite nicely now with the original surround, which I'll clean up, that original chrome surround, because I want to keep that in the car, and the gauges are sitting in and mounted in nicely into the dash. But for now, that is looking good, so let's look at wiring these things up. So after spending half an hour getting the car back up on the hoist, taking the wheel off, having a look at where I did my wiring to try and remember how I wired up my oil level gauge. Remember, I previously labelled it oil, and I was confusing that, thinking that was an oil pressure line, but it's actually oil level. Maybe I should have been a little bit more obvious with that, but now I've got where that is, and I've double checked it, and it's still got the correct resistance for an empty tank, so that is definitely the right wire. So now I'm going to wire that up to the gauge, and then we can have a gauge and start looking at what else we need to do. The good thing is this Raceworks gauge actually has like 6 or 7 different sort of inputs that it will accept, and one of them is exactly in the right range of what I need, so that basically on the current empty it's empty, and the current full it's full, and the exact level that I want when I measured where the float will be in the tank is just above half. So when I redo the face of this gauge, I can get it so that it's sitting exactly where I want it, so I can get it in that range, and that will all be good. So that is going to work nicely, hopefully. And the oil. So I went through and wired them up. I put in Deutsch connectors. I really like Deutsch connectors. They're just a nice, neat fitting, waterproof connector. Just makes everything nice and neat. There is a huge mess of wires under here. That's, I mean, that's the back of the fuse box, but I've spent a lot of time wiring this car to try and make it as usable as possible, and also make it easily disconnectable, which is the good thing about these gauges, is they actually come with little jump wires, so that once you wire up the lights and the power and stuff to one of them, you can just jump and daisy chain a bunch of them together. So now it's time to plug these in, and then I'm going to go and start actually checking the wiring before I connect everything up, and hopefully don't let the smoke out. I'm a little bit apprehensive, but I'm going to be starting to connect up the power for the first time. And I have a plan of attack so that I hopefully don't fry everything. I'm going to connect up my negative cable. That's not a problem. And have that connected up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my power probe to test the circuit. So what I'm going to do is, because you can actually, just by clicking the button, I can actually send power into a circuit. I'm going to connect this up and send power into each circuit before I connect it up properly or put a fuse in or anything. And this has its own circuit breaker. So if it's got a dead short in it, instead of frying things or blowing fuses, it will just pop the circuit breaker in this. I know I've messed up somewhere, and then I can start troubleshooting. So that is my plan of attack, to systematically go through and start connecting up a circuit at a time, using this so that I don't fry everything when I connect it up. Let's see how that goes. Oh, that gave me a heart attack. I've been going through and connecting up fuses and just checking circuits as I go. And when I turn the ignition on, I'm at the stage now where I need to actually click over and connect ignition. And I started getting a noise, a electric motor type noise coming from the car somewhere. And I was worried I'd wired something up wrong. I wasn't sure what was going on. I thought it could be the starter motor just spinning freely and not actually engaging anything, which would be a real, yeah, that would be really disappointing if that happens. But it wasn't the starter. It was actually the electric water pump. It works, it's connected, and it's running, but we don't want that running at the moment because there's no water in it, and I don't want to sort of burn it out running dry. So I'm going to disconnect the that whole Davis Craig electric water pump system that controls the fans and the water pump and stuff. Not necessary, because at the start we just want to get the thing running with no coolant, just start it and just see if I can actually get it going. So we'll disconnect that and keep going through my systems. Everything so far, touch wood, everywhere, is working as it's supposed to, and it's functioning as normal. All right, so everything is working so far as it should. I haven't let the smoke out anywhere yet, and everything, yeah, seems to be going okay. Now, I've powered up the ECU for the very first time for this car. For those who haven't followed it, I am using a Link G4X Extreme ECU. Link, particularly at the time, was one of the few ECU manufacturers that could run twin electronic throttles. Which is obviously what I have to do with this. To get the ECU started, I need to actually get it unlocked. So they're locked from factory and they have an unlock code. So I need to give them the serial number and they'll send me an unlock code, unlock the ECU, and then start putting in some parameters. Like, for starters, the basics. You know, it's a V8, so 8 cylinders. What's the firing order? And a bunch of things. Now, I had to make a custom crank trigger on this car because the Ferrari had it on the flywheel. I no longer have a Ferrari flywheel. I had to make a separate crank trigger, which I mounted to the pulley on the front with a wheel and a Hall effect sensor on that. So I've got that set up. I need to give the basic location of where that center is to give a ballpark of where to actually try and start the car. All right, so I'm not going to solely rely on an electronic gauge to tell me my oil level. I also want a dipstick. I hate cars that don't have a dipstick. And I actually designed this when I built the dry sump tank. It's not the greatest dipstick. This is just a bit of aluminium welding wire that I've sanded to give it a bit of a rough surface so that the oil can stick to it. And there's actually a loop in the top of the entrance to the tank. It's a bit awkward to get it in, but once I get it in the loop, I can put this in all the way down and leave it in the tank with the lid on it, and I can just reach in. Same as what I've got on my old 911, very similar type thing. I just use some snips to just put some marks in it, roughly where I sort of think the ballpark level should be to start with, and that will give me a rough idea. So I can just check it now, and I think this is it. I think it's time to put some oil in it. Okay, and my dipstick works properly. I just double checked with the gauge. The gauge is also reading full. It's right up to the top. I just put 5 litres of oil into it. It's going to take a bit of cranking to get it going through the oil cooler and all of that, all the lines and things like that. So it should take probably about 10 litres of oil, somewhere around there, depending on the capacity of my dry sump tank and how much is supposed to be in the system. The issue is that I don't actually know how much was originally in the gearbox section of the Ferrari, so it's hard to sort of really know that level and compare it to this level. We'll just have to play it by ear, basically. All right, well, the first issue I can see is I have an oil leak. So this fitting going into the adapter plate, I forgot that there's no seal on it. It's just like a fitting a thread straight into the threaded adapter. So what I need to do is I'm going to back it out and hopefully not all the way, not let all the oil out, and wrap it in Teflon and then try again. And I think that should hopefully stop that bit from leaking. All right, a bunch of Teflon put on there and done up again. So fingers crossed that stopped the leak. All right, I've been looking over everything. I think there's nothing else to be done now except for try to crank it. Now, I'm not going to try and start it. There's no fuel in it. I just need to start turning it over and pumping oil through the system and getting it, just getting it moving. I did put oil in the cylinders when I put the spark plugs in. So, don't even know if it cranks yet. Let's see. Okay. We're getting nothing. We're getting no crank. So that means one thing, that I messed up somewhere and I'm not getting any power to the starter solenoid. I'm just going to try and manually do it with the power probe and just see if that will get things moving. Let's try it the manual way. Oh, it turns over. Oh. Sounds strong. All right, so it cranks, which means a few things that went very well. It's the first time we've been able to properly test the adapter plate and the flywheel and all of that sort of stuff. It was a very long time ago, so I understand if you missed it or you don't remember what it was, but basically I wanted to design this using a Subaru flywheel. So this is using basically a standard Subaru BRZ flywheel that the bolt pattern is slightly different, but it's located in the center, sort of hub located if you like. And I got a local machine shop to basically just elongate the holes. It was only by about 1 millimeter each. And we did all the measurements to try and make sure the offset was correct from, so basically the standard, it's almost a standard flywheel, standard Subaru clutch, or actually it's an upgraded clutch, but it's an off-the-shelf BRZ clutch and BRZ starter motor, and all that works. It cranks hard, so the starter seems to be able to handle it because it's got all the plugs in and everything, and it's cranking nice and quickly, which sounds good. So everything of that seems strong at this stage. I did wire my oil level gauge incorrectly, I believe, because it wasn't working properly. So I went back and checked the oil because obviously started cranking it. There's 2 oil pumps internally in the Ferrari engine. So it is an internal dry sump engine. It is, it's a factory dry sump. So it has the pressure pump where the oil goes from my tank straight to the pressure pump, and that pushes it through the engine. And then it's got the scavenge pump that collects the remainder of the oil at the bottom of the engine. Not quite a sump, but wherever it gathers the bottom of the engine and pumps it through the oil cooler and back around to the tank. So the tank is now empty, which I sort of understand from cranking it a bit. So obviously that oil has gone through and filled the lines and that sort of stuff. So that's 5 litres of oil that it obviously requires inside the engine, which is good because I know it's supposed to take about 10. I'm going to top it up again, and hopefully this time my gauge will read the way it's supposed to, and then we can start cranking a bit more and make sure we get it all around and see if we have actually wired up an oil pressure gauge correctly. All right, so let me sort of explain how the gauge works. So this gauge is now reading correctly. I had the wires around the wrong way for the sender, and basically that is my ideal full level or ideal running level. There's a graph here with the Raceworks gauge showing a bunch of different settings, and basically on the autometer sender setting, the low is 240 ohms and full is 33 ohms. I measured on with the sender itself when I actually set the car up, and at the bottom it read 235 ohms, which is perfect. And at the top, if it was above 50, it was too full. So that is basically perfect for this readout. And I can see on the odometer sender between half and 5/8 is 105.87. So it should be somewhere between there is my 95 ideal. Now it may be a little bit over full, because I know with my 911, when you first start it up, when it's cold, the oil level is really, really low. As it warms up, I assume the oil expands a bit or something, and the level comes up to where it should be. So you only should really measure it when it's warm. I just want to make sure that there's enough oil in this so that when I do go to start it, it's not going to run this completely dry. So let's keep cranking. So that is all good. We actually have, it was a bit blurry, the camera wouldn't focus on these gauges, but we have just under 40 pounds of oil pressure. So I think that is quite good for cranking. So we have oil pressure, we have oil level. We are looking good so far. So now I'm going to go through and I need to check my wiring on the engine. So I need to start testing all of the injectors and coil packs individually. Now, I don't understand everything with the Link software, but basically I know that I can do an ignition test, and I just went through and I can sort of click on each, and I'm not sure if the mic's picking that up, but you can hear the injector going. And I went through, I checked all of the injectors. Only one is that I can hear them all. Injector number 6 is very quiet, so that's something I'm going to have to just keep an eye on. But everything else seems to be running as it should, I think.
Which one of the last things I'd forgotten to install was the wideband sensors. Thankfully Raceworks rushed them out to me, and I've got them in. And then of course it needs fuel, and I've put in 10 litres of 98, which I believe is roughly 93 in the US, because we measure things differently. And just rewiring one of the throttle bodies, but it still doesn't seem to work, so that might need a bit more investigation.
All right, well, where do we get to? Basically, I've got some little niggling issues. The fuel pump is not quite running from the ECU. I'm not sure why. I'm getting 12 volts from the ECU, but it's not quite enough to kick over the fuel pump relay, so I'm not sure what's going on there. We've got the second throttle is currently not working for some reason. The first throttle calibrates, so because we have 2 electronic throttles, you have to calibrate the throttles to work properly, then we calibrate the pedal sensor. All of the injectors seem to be working, all the coil packs seem to be working. The car starts, it cranks, it has oil pressure. We are getting there, but there's still lots of little teething issues to get right. Adam from Link in New Zealand sent me a basic map, but I think I gave him the incorrect position of the crank wheel. When I connected up the crank trigger sensor, basically that they need to know where the trigger sensor is in relation to the missing teeth in the 60-2 trigger wheel, in relation to top dead center of the engine. And there's no timing lights at the engine, so I can't actually use a timing light to even get it close. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. So I will keep you up to date when I work out exactly what I'm doing as far as that goes. But I think for the time being, we're not starting it this week, unfortunately. So I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, in 2008, Ferrari revived a name they had last used in the 1950s and 60s with the Ferrari California. Like its namesake, the California Spider, the California was a convertible, but that is where the similarities end. 2008 California represented a long list of firsts for Ferrari. It was the first front-engine V8, the first 7-speed dual clutch, and the first hardtop convertible. Additionally, it was the first multi-link rear suspension and direct injection engine. The California was designed by Pininfarina and used a slightly detuned version of the F430's 4.2-litre V8, making 460 horsepower. In 2012, a mid-run refresh gave the California a bump of 30 horsepower and a weight reduction of 30 kilos. Now, the California was built in a new facility adjacent to the current one in Maranello, producing around 17,000 units over its 9-year run.
All right, we didn't start it this week. It got close. There's so many little niggly things to work out with the tune and calibrating everything and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of bits and pieces, but we're getting there. There's a few issues. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I did all the wiring, so I have me to blame and not really completely knowing what I'm doing. I have wired a couple of these things now, but it's just the way it goes. It's close. It cranks over. That is a huge win because that means the adapter plate actually worked properly and all that sort of stuff. I don't think we've got any more oil leaks. It seems like I've fixed the oil leak. We actually have 9.5 litres of oil in the car, which is pretty much, I think they had about 10 in the original Ferrari, so it looks like my tank is similar size to what Ferrari had, and everything else seems to be working at this stage. Fingers crossed. Next week, hopefully we can start it.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
That is the goal. Next week, 100%, I have to start the car next week. So hopefully you'll join us for that. Fingers crossed.
Please like, subscribe, and thank you for those kind wishes about my dental issue.
Yes.
Sorry about the slurring. It's been epic. I've got a plated, so I'm still getting used to talking with it in. So
yeah.
But I've been married for a long time, so I'm going to have lots of time to get used to it.
Yes. So, yes. Anyway, we'll see you guys on the next one.
You can see you next time.
See you guys.
Ferrari revived a name they had last
Loosed?
The first dual-speed 7 convertible. No, that's not right. First direct injection engine and first multi-link rear suspension. Additionally, it was also the first multi-rear link suspension.
Multi-link rear.
Additionally, it was the first multi-rear link
Multi-link rear.
No, don't interrupt my process. Just give me a chance.